shine on, shine on, shine on. Talk to Don G, step in the spot, show the whole world really got the world inside and a Gordian knot. More dry right step in the light. Show us what you got. Now's your time to shine. Shine on, shine on into the G-spot. Shine on, shine on into the G-spot. Shine on, shine on into the G-spot. Shine, shine a light.
Is that a commercial?
Oh, this is just another part of the intro, Greg.
Watch those nature documentaries. Yeah. One about life.
It's quite an eclectic intro.
He's the king of the jungle. King up here. He's laying down under a tree. He's so big. He's so hot. No, they stop messing with him. Biting his ears.
Like a travelogue.
Lioness. She starts messing with him, making trouble. Still, nothing. Now, the other animals, they notice. They start moving.
What kind of an opening is this?
Jackals.
This makes no sense.
Hyenas. They're barking at him, laughing at him. They get his toes and eat the food. It's in his domain. They do this. And they get so one day, that lion gets up and tears the shit out of everybody. Because every once in a while, a lion has to shoot at jackals. Who is? He's too late to escape.
How long does this go on for?
Und dieses Volk wollen wir reden und wollen wir kämpfen und niemals erlahmen und niemals ermüden und niemals verzagen und niemals verzweifeln.
Don't G, step in the spot, show the whole world what you really got. The world is tired and a Gordian knot. Moral foundation complete, dry rock. Step into the light, show us what you got. Your time is now. Truth does forget me not. Share, you know how. In the G-spot. Shine on, shine on, shine on, shine on, shine a light, shine on, shine on, shine on, shine a light on truth. Shine on, shine on, shine on, shine on, shine on, shine on. Now's your time to shine. Shine on, shine on. Step into the G-spot. Shine on, shine on. Step into the G-spot. Shine on, shine on. Step into the G-spot. Shine on, shine on. Shine on, shine on. Shine on, shine on. Shine on, shine on. Shine a light, shine on. Shine on, shine on. Shine a light on truth. Shine on, shine on. Shine on, shine on. Shine on, shine on. Shine on. Shine on, shine on, shine on.
All right, welcome to the premiere episode of my new long form interview series. Did a lot of these shows from 2020, 24, and then we went to panels, but now we're going to start doing long form. There's too many vital individuals, such as our premier guest, Greg Felton. Let me set up his new book on the screen here real quick. It's called Shoot the Messengers. And it is just a brilliant book, really brilliant and totally on point, over the target, as they say. So, Greg, welcome, and what led you to produce your fourth book, which is just excellent? I finished it last night, and it's heartbreaking to think if we had an ethical media, the so-called fourth estate, the last 50, 80 years, and the American public wasn't so brutally dumbed down by the controlled media. If there was a real independent media, then what a different country we would have, probably what a different world we would have, Greg. So welcome, and tell us your thoughts going into writing Shoot the Messengers.
Well, thank you, Giuseppe. It's been a while since I've been on your show, and I'm honored to be the first of your long form interviews. I was not aware of that until a moment or two ago.
From 2020 to 2024, I used to do all kinds, and you were a repeat guest, and then went to a more of a panel format a couple of years ago, something different. I was kind of burning out on the reading so many books and yada yada. But now it's time again, because there's a new crop, and again, Shoot the Messengers is a great book. It as I mentioned before, we were talking before we went on air, for every familiar quote like the Jamie McIntyre when he showed up at the Pentagon and clearly no plane hit the Pentagon, it was a cruise missile. But then you have like 5 great research, because you're a world-class researcher, quotes that I never knew about, and they just totally nail the coffin of these lies by the mass media. So please tell us about your what led you to write Shoot the Messengers, and how do you feel now that it's done?
Well, I'm very glad that it's done. I mean, it's always good. Writing a book's a bit like having a baby. I mean, it's a lot of work giving birth, but once you do, then you see the product and you're very happy that your new child has been born. Sometimes I wonder how I managed to survive writing books, because you look back at the works that I've done and think, geez, I actually wrote that? I mean, that took a lot of effort.
Yeah.
This one I started writing this because after writing books on the Zionist occupation of America, the false narrative of the SARS-2 virus, and a compendium of essays about the the Zionist occupation of America, I thought it would be useful to look at, why these succeeded so well. Now, it's not really revelatory to say the media is corrupt, but I thought I had to explain not only these great crimes, but also why these crimes were so successful. And
Right.
if we had an honest media, they could not have been successful. So I decided to investigate why the media, or how the media, managed to persuade so many people to accept such patent absurdities.
Yeah.
And
That's a great way to put it. Patent absurdities. Yeah.
because if you look at the actual narrative of the World Trade Center, it's stupid. And nobody with half a brain believes that aircraft struck the buildings when there was no wreckage of aircraft having struck the buildings. The fact that the buildings were built to withstand airplane impact means that it's highly illogical to explain how any alleged fire could have weakened the structures to bring them down. Similarly, for the SARS-2 virus, anybody who believes those drugs that were pushed were vaccines, were healthy, forgets the fact that the media actively sabotaged critical information about these vaccines, and aided and abetted the persecution of doctors that recommended other remedies for the virus. So I started to think that none of these great crimes, as I call them, could have taken place without the active participation of the media, making them plausible and effectively sabotaging contrary points of view. As I mentioned in the book, I mean, there you can see where, and I don't want to give it, but Fox News actually debunked the narrative right away, and but then they ended up repudiating themselves. So we
Well, what's so interesting about and in the from 1990 to 97, I worked for a company called Nimbus Manufacturing, which was the whole CD audio, especially CD-ROM manufacturing boom, where all of a sudden Windows Magazine was including a free CD-ROM in the shrink wrap the magazine. It was a big thing. And so I used to have to go up. I was the Eastern Regional Sales Manager.
Mhm.
One time I ever had a real high paying job. And And I used to have to go to the World Trade Center once a month. I had several clients in there, and I'd been in there, I don't know, 50 times probably. And they always, the first couple times you're there, and they give you the tour and why the elevators, why you have to get off and go to a different elevator and all that. And they were so proud of the fact that, a plane could hit this, and even hit the Empire State Building back in the 1920s, I think it was, and there was very little damage. And so when my wife and I were living out in New Mexico at that time, and I'm like, there's no way those planes could bring that down. I mean, it went against the laws of physics, and yet how many people immediately just trusted the media, Greg? It's insane.
It is insane because, well, for one thing, the idea of plane impact, as I say, was built into the building itself. But if you're presented with a shock, with something that is so truly appalling, your first instinct is to know that you don't know what's going on and to believe what you see. And one of the things I do in my book is I demonstrate the facts that were kept from the public about the plausibility of an aircraft striking the building, which I disprove completely. It is physically impossible.
Exactly.
But also, if you are stampeded into believing something because you don't know what's going on and the experts tell you something, you will shut down your critical faculties and believe what you're told rather than what you see. Now, a lot of people were shown these aircraft flying into the buildings, but even at the time, nobody saw anything. The only people who saw airplanes were people watching the television. And what does that tell you about the airplanes? Because the airplanes could not have existed when the people were meant to believe they did. And if you look at how the planes were presented on the TV screens, and I have screen captures and I show frame by frame how the planes allegedly struck the building,
Right.
you can see how they were faked.
Yes.
They were superimposed on the TV screen digitally. They did not exist at the time of the building's collapse, and we know this for an absolute fact. And one of the things I do in my book in chapter 1, which really was a challenge to write, I think I must have rewritten chapter 1 about 30 times, because I wanted to present the difference between fact and truth. And I don't think I've ever seen this anywhere else. Now, I could be wrong. Maybe this has been something that's been around a long time. But a fact is something that you can verify for yourself. A truth is something that you accept as factual because you choose to believe it. And what happened was, throughout all of the stories in my book, of the examples in my book, truth was imposed on the public. Now, a truth is a fact that's been prejudged to be accurate and imposed on the public. Belief is not necessary. Obedience is necessary. That's all. For something
great line.
to be
You should say that again. That's so vital, and that's how the globalists wield the power they do.
They impose truths on people, and it's done in such a way that people either are afraid to challenge it or are gulled into believing it. And so, for example, the issue of these drugs being vaccines to save you. Well, nobody was told that Pfizer admitted that there was no attempt to prevent transmission of disease.
But they sure lied about that a lot, right?
They lied about it, but the media didn't really report this.
Right.
You have to go outside the mainstream media to find any useful information. Well, I won't say any, but most useful information. And this is why when I say shoot the messengers, I don't mean the individual reporters, although I could make some exceptions.
Sure.
But I mean, it's the mainstream press, the corporate media that is deciding what is real for everyone. And this establishment of a forced conformity makes the commission of great crime possible because criticism and action against it is made illegal. And people are conditioned into believing what they are told rather than what they know. And people
Right. Great point.
don't go out and they don't research, facts for themselves. It's much easier to believe what you're told because, oh, it's just coming in through my television or my internet feed. Someone's done the thinking for me, so I don't have to do it myself. And that's the mentality that is killing democracies. People are
Well,
being
that's a great point. I want to stop right here and make a point that Greg has 4 books at Banned by Amazon, which is Dave's imprint. If you want to use credit cards or debit cards, or you can go to Money Tree Publishing if you want to use crypto. But the Greg says in his introduction preface that he feels like this latest book, Shoot the Messenger, is like a prequel of the other 3 books, which is an interesting view. But the nice thing that Dave Gahary, the owner of Banned by Amazon and Money Tree Publishing, he's put they all just feature the great Felton research. Every one of these books, for every Jamie McIntyre familiar quote, or what's that idiot Klaus Schwab familiar quote from the World Economic Forum, Greg finds 10 quotes from vital operatives that you don't find anywhere else. So Dave has put together a bundle. You get all 4 books, and believe me, just for the footnotes and the research alone, they're worth owning for only $82, and you can save 10%. Use the code GMAN, GMAN, and you'll save $8.20. And so what's so vital about these works is everybody knows the famous quote from the Harley Davidson guy that he explained it like he was a physicist 5 minutes after it happened. But the point of owning these books is that there's so much research, years of research into areas most people don't know how to find or expose. So that's why you should go to Banned by Amazon now and order the Felton bundle. So I'm going to do that commercial several times, Greg, because your
That's
books.
okay.
Yeah, that's okay.
I'm not going to complain.
Knock yourself out, right, Greg?
The reason I also did Shoot the Messengers is that I wanted to help people determine when they're being lied to. And there were a couple of things that happened that were so funny. One of them was regarding the World Trade Center. And the way that the media sold the lie that this was a bunch of hijacked aircraft by Muslim extremists, well, hijacked aircraft at any rate, was that they had these plants. These are people that they had predetermined were going to be interviewed. Right. And they sold the lie very badly. And there are 2 people in the story, one of whom was, and again, this is interesting, they were conveniently out on their patio, their balcony, smoking a cigarette. They just happened to be there when they saw a plane strike the building. Well, that's a wonderful coincidence. Yes, one of them said it was remarkable because she very rarely sees planes flying over the Hudson. Okay, that's fine. The other one, that was a woman. Then there's a man that's been interviewed. And he says, I was out there smoking my cigarette and, I saw this plane fly over the Hudson, which is a common occurrence. So he completely contradicted them. Right. So one of the things you can tell from people who speak is that they have to keep to a script, which is patently false.
Right.
And it's very easy to make mistakes. And so you can listen to the language that's used. You can tell what's a generic claim that isn't supported. You can find expressions from 2 different sources that contradict each other if you're prepared to do the work of looking for evidence of you on your own. You shouldn't be relying on the media to think for you. But we live in a world where progress is defined in one way as having to do less to get more. We live in a world that rewards ease and leisure and cheapness. So if it's cheap for you to get Fox on your TV and you can sit back and let them do the thinking for you, well, then fine, you can go through life as a happy little idiot. And
Right.
a lot of people choose to do that. But if you want to think, if you want to find out what's going on and you want the facts, not the formula, well, then you're going to be very disillusioned. And I suspect this is why a lot of people don't want to know what's going on, because if they did know, they would realize that their country has been taken over by a cabal of sociopathic criminals.
Yes.
And this is precisely what has happened with the Trumpocracy. I refuse to call Trump a president because he's not a president. He's a third-rate little thug who is a prop for Israelis who control the United States, either directly or indirectly. And so you have a situation where the public now is actually waking up, has woken up to the fact that Trump is basically an idiot, and their country is being sold down the river. But it's important to realize that this is not a recent phenomenon. This has happened only recently. The Trump has happened only recently, but this particular scenario goes back at least to Ronald Reagan, which is what I say in my first book, The Host and the Parasite. Now, the parasite is Israel.
Right.
And it was Reagan who, as again, another underqualified Republican, another idiot Republican who became president. He allowed the Zionists to infiltrate the legislative and assistant ministerial levels of government, such that by the end of the 1980s, the Zionist occupation had been complete. They got rid of George Bush, who was his vice president, then president, who had the temerity to want to have a meaningful peace in Palestine. So he forced, Yitzhak Shamir to go to Madrid to have this dialogue, and he was never forgiven for that. And the treasonous bastards of the Project for a New American Century ended up, like Richard Pearl and Paul Weyrich and other sorts, ended up smearing Bush to support Israel. Now, by and large, these people should have been tried for treason, but they weren't. So we know that the United States had been under Israel's thumb for quite some time. And so by the time Trump comes along, the decadent empire that that Israel had built in the United States was essentially running out of steam. And there's an interesting book to be written on why Israel at this time decided to push the United States over the edge. And what's happened since the 2024 election has been truly bizarre by any logical standard. And it would be very interesting to look at why Israel pushed the United States at this time, because there seems to be no logical reason for it. I do have a theory, but I don't want to get into that right now. But
Okay.
if you look at how Israel has decided to basically torch America just to bomb Iran, that makes no sense.
No, it's insanely irrational. And by the way, The Host and the Parasite is an expanded post-Obama edition now at 550 pages. And again, in the chat, there's a retired dear friend, Navy man, Blaston Baston, who said, Greg waked me up. He didn't want to say woke me up. Greg waked me up with his book, The Host and the Parasite. So there you go. Here's a guy who was, and then he says, I was always wondering where the engines were. I'm a dumb aircraft mechanic. Commercial jet engines weigh between, and he's a literal aircraft mechanic for the Navy, between
Mhm.
3,000 and 10,000 pounds on average, with smaller narrow body engines starting around 4,300 pounds and massive wide body power plants exceeding 2,100 pounds. And I mean, when you just start to look factually, Greg, these lies are whoppers, and why people believe them other than they're entranced. You know, how many people have said over the decades since television was introduced
Mhm.
in the late 40s, early 50s, that it's like you're bringing, you know, you're introducing an alien into your living room when you turn that thing on. It really has a powerful entrancement capability, and boy, if you're not, you know, savvy to that, you get sucked right in. It's crazy.
What's disturbing about the false narratives is that they they push away the facts that undermine them to the point where when people argue, for example, the World Trade Center, nobody
Mhm.
argues the absence of wreckage. Nobody argues the absurdity of a plane bringing down a whole building onto its footprint. They argue about the narrative itself. The narrative becomes the basis for argument. You end up arguing the narrative back and forth. And
Right.
this is a danger because anybody who supports the narrative can always come back and assert his position over and over. You can't defeat it because the narrative is not rational. It has no foundation that you can attack. It's simply rhetorical garbage. But what I hope that people do when they read the Shoot the Messengers is that they ignore the narrative and they look at the physics of the theory that aircraft brought the buildings down. Now, do aircraft have the incendiary capacity? No. How did aircraft, again, this is also in The Host and the Parasite, chapter 11. How did aircraft strike the building and not and the outside walls of the building? How did they not maintain the integrity of the structure?
Right.
Because in the FEMA report, and I think it's Appendix A1, they talk about a building in Los Angeles and one in Philadelphia, both of whom had horrific fires,
Right.
and the buildings didn't collapse. I mean, the actual FEMA report on 9/11 is a refutation of the official narrative. But
Exactly.
nobody reads the appendices. And even if you bring it up, you'll be shut down, you'll be ignored, you'll be persecuted, because the whole function of the media is to inhibit communication about great crimes. It's a censor medium. That's all it is. And this is why I think it's time we took out our guns and we started shooting them. I mean, at least metaphorically. I
Right.
mean, I hope you realize that just recently, the federal court put stopped the horrific merger between Paramount and Warner Brothers, Warner Brothers Discovery. The Ellison family, he's a Zionist wacko
Oh,
from.
they're psychopaths. Yeah.
They are psychopathic, and they're second wealthiest man in America. He wanted to merge his Paramount, which is essentially a Trump apologetics network,
Yes.
with Warner Brothers, which owns CNN, and that was stopped. That is not going ahead. It was just
Yeah, they
happened.
just announced yesterday it's been put
Yeah,
on hold for a year, I think. Yeah.
that's right. And then they may just kill it altogether.
Yeah. Yeah.
What's right now? I think this is the first time I've seen recently, at least, that the mainstream media is coming under attack, and they're facing up to the reality of their own vacuity. Even Fox News can't lie enough to prop up Trump. I mean, even when job numbers come out that are horrific, even when public opinion polls are horrific, they are forced into the most embarrassing apologetics, or they simply have to admit that what they're selling the public is nonsense. So we have the media now is collapsing, and you're seeing a growth in a lot of people subscribing to, shall we say, non-standard news sources. There are some very good ones like Really American and Aaron Parnas.
Mhm.
There's Alex Barnico. There's a lot of really great people out there writing good material, good
That's true.
firsthand
Right.
material, researched material about the Iran aggression, about about the Epstein files, which has all unfortunately become background white noise.
Yeah.
This is what happens when you repeat a slogan over and over again. It just becomes so much. People get exhausted. You get compassion fatigue. But the good news is that the Senate, those in the Senate who haven't been politically lobotomized, are still keeping this on the front burner. And thanks to Thomas Massey, who
Yes.
ironically, now this is something I found fascinating. He was pushed out of his Congress seat because Trump didn't want him in. This moron, this one guy got elected, and hardly anybody showed up to his victory party.
Right.
He looked like a ghost candidate, to be quite honest. I'd like to see the votes in that to see how many were legitimate. At any rate, um, Massey now, outside of Congress, is now free to run for the Senate now that Mitch McConnell has all been but pronounced dead.
Right.
So once McConnell is dead, which will happen, if it hasn't happened already, is going to happen very soon,
Yes.
Thomas Massey is going to run for the Senate.
And he'll probably win.
Yeah, he'll win in a walk. And that will make Trump's life even worse. Just such a ironic, this is karma coming again back to bite Trump.
Well, Greg, let's talk about Trump for a little bit. This guy has, I don't know if you ever caught that documentary during his first term that Netflix did. It was a 4-episode documentary per decade, like the 70s Trump, 80s Trump, 90s, and then 2000 and beyond Trump. And it was stunning in how it revealed just how this guy is like an incompetent force of nature who's allowed to get bigger and grow in like a real world example of the Peter principle. Mm-hmm. And so, and where I'm going is there's the classic quote from Wilbur, geez, I can't think of his last name, the former head of the Treasury and all that. And he said, well, we could have, I'm thinking Wilbur Wood, but that was the knuckleball pitcher for the White Sox in the 60s and 70s. Anyway, Wilbur something. And he, maybe somebody in the chat will know. And he said, well, we could have destroyed Trump at any time, but we thought at some point he would be of great use to us. And how about a liberal Democrat, New York degenerate, suddenly becoming a born-again, make America great Republican conservative and winning? It's insane.
Don't forget it was Trump's mother. You see what her quote about her son was?
Yeah,
I love my son. He's an idiot. Let's face it, he's an idiot.
Yeah.
And I hope he never gets into politics. I mean, this is a wonderful endorsement of her son. She knew he was a brain dead walking, is an idiot. But then Trump also, and I saw this clip as well, he's on being interviewed. And I'm going to paraphrase here, but essentially he said, well, if I ever run for president, I'd run as a Republican because Republican voters are too stupid to know what they're voting for. They would vote for me no matter what I did.
And that's exactly what he did, right?
Yeah, and Republicans are stupid. They have, I don't mean all of them, but I mean most Republican voters from the red states, who are the poorest states in America, they have the highest crime rate, the lowest education rate. This is essentially the bottom of the barrel of America. And these are the people who are staunchly pro-Trump. And one thing I was also studying the phenomenon of Trump's support, in that people support him not because not because he's accurate or because he knows what he's doing, but because it's a form of entertainment. These people have bought into Trump so thoroughly that they cannot be rational about their support for him, because that would call into question their own commitment, their own sense of self. I mean, a lot of these people despise the Democrats for their populism. And so because of that, we have no choice, but we have to vote for Trump.
Right.
And Trump may be an idiot, but at least he's better than the opposition. And so people will buy into Trump because he tells them what they want to hear.
Yes.
This is entertainment as politics. And there's one thing I do intend to write reasonably soon. I want to show how there is a continuum between Ronald Reagan and Donald Trump. Because
there is a continuum. You're absolutely right.
They're very similar. Because
Yes.
Reagan also said, "Make America Great Again."
Yeah. They had that. It's morning in America. The time is now. I remember that song from the camp. The time is now. The time is now for America, America. Right. I mean, it was all.
Right.
The sun was rising. It was the dawn of a. I mean, yeah. It's kind of sad, Greg. Think about it. If you do like put on your Canadian federal profiler, or if you were down in the States, your FBI profiler hat, and look at these people. They're these MAGA types are decent people. They just want their life the way it was when they were young, right? Simple, traditional, basically lived amongst their own white cities and all that. And it's kind of sad that they cannot. It seems as though they do not have the intellectual ability to see how this dry rot into one of the key standpoints, in my opinion, of these patriotic flyover state types is they believe in moral certainty, right? They go to church, they believe in God, they want, they obey the laws, and they think everybody else should too, which I agree. You should obey the laws. You shouldn't like wantonly sneak up somebody and sucker punch them and all the crazy shit that's going on today. But the problem is they don't understand that since 1965 and the Hart-Sellers Act, that the classical liberal or the classical conservative was morphed into neoconservatives and neoliberals, which to me is just a euphemism for zioconservative and zioliberal. So what we have now is this globalist control, and these poor people are like, well, what can I do? I have to vote for somebody. And they don't even understand, Greg, that the courts have validated the fact that first from Ron Paul, when Ron Paul was running and winning these primaries, and then they were giving all the delegates to George Bush, and they sued, and the courts ruled that it's not an actual election. You're a member of a club. The Republican Party is a club. The Democratic Party is a club. And as such, the leaders of the club can set whatever rules they want. So basically, if you think your vote counts, it doesn't in these clubs. And to me, that's so offensive, Greg. And yet nobody thinks to go and vote for independent candidates, to create viable independent parties, to challenge this corrupted, locked system that does not serve the voters in any capacity. It's just madness the more you look at it. Your thoughts?
Well, it does. Well, we have a similar problem in Canada. We have a phenomenon called strategic voting, and this to me we probably have had this for quite a while, but I don't remember being so blatant until about 2005. People don't vote for the candidate they want. They vote against the candidate they hate. So if I'm in a riding here in Canada and we have a conservative candidate who basically subscribes to absolute Zionism and a dumbass political leader, I can vote either Liberal, NDP, or Green. Now, NDP is New Democratic Party, which is now, it used to be center-left, but now it's so confused it doesn't know what it believes. The Green, of course, is self-evident.
Right.
So I can choose to vote either Green, NDP, or Liberal, depending on which I think has the best chance of defeating the Conservative, if the Conservative has a hope in hell of winning.
Right.
So that's how I vote. or that's how many people vote. That's how I voted the last election,
Sure.
because we don't have a legitimate political system. Now, we tried in British Columbia to do this a little while ago. We tried to have a referendum to allow for proportional representation, which would have done a lot to free up people to vote their conscience without fear that some horrible party might sneak up the middle and steal the election because of a
Sure.
split vote. But that was destroyed by a bunch of paranoid fear mongering that was allowed, that the media allowed to take place. And a lot of people didn't want to have to think too much, so they bought into the fear campaign. So long as we have a first past the post system, which is when you have, no matter how many candidates you have in a riding, the one who gets the most votes wins, even if that's a minority of the total votes cast. And that actually happened in 1991 in a riding in Quebec. So unless we have a fair political electoral system, there's no point even thinking we live in a democracy. We don't. It's a political theater. That's all it is.
Yeah, sad. And what is it about people, Greg, in your opinion, that makes them become so obstinate about acknowledging that their belief in the truth doesn't make it true, you know? So suddenly they don't want to hear anything from a candidate that doesn't, that's telling them hard truths. They want to be lied to, sweet little lies whispered in their ears, like the useless beauty contest that most first world elections have de-evolved into.
Well, people want to have H.L. Mencken, the great American journalist, made the observation that the average person doesn't want to be free. He just wants to be safe.
Yeah, great line.
So you have a scenario where people care about making enough money to support their families, to have to send kids to university if they want, to live in reasonable freedom.
Right.
But they want the safety of knowing that freedom isn't going to be taken away from them. So that's the safe factor that supersedes the freedom factor. So people will go along with the herd because they think it's the safest thing to do. Those people who stick their necks out, people like Edward Snowden or Julian Assange,
right,
these are the people who get persecuted for doing the right thing. And the media is responsible for creating a zeitgeist in which criminality has been normalized.
Yeah.
Heroism has been criminalized. Truth has become fictionalized, and facts have become demonized.
Yeah.
And this is the world we live in, actually.
Yes.
In the opposite land. I mean, I teach novels to students as well. I've recently taught 1984 again.
Oh wow!
And if you there's two books I want to talk about briefly, but 1984 shows that people who stick their necks out end up becoming victims of the state.
Yes.
So what happened to Winston Smith and his girlfriend Julia?
Yes, exactly.
But what also is a little distressing is that people who want to live a safe life also want to live a happy life. And if you ever read Brave New World by Aldous Huxley,
yes, I've read it.
People will pleasure themselves into oblivion. So long as people have enough sex, drugs, and other visual entertainment, they don't much care what goes on. All they want is to enjoy life. It's sort of
Yes.
like some hedonistic anti-world.
Right.
And again, Plato, believe it or not, was on this about 2,500 years ago.
Amazing.
That he condemned the democracies for creating sloth, inattention to civic duty, allowing the less intelligent people to take control of a society because those who are smart enough know better than to get involved. He saw the degeneration of democracies into tyranny. It's a priceless analysis. You don't have to agree with everything Plato said. But if you don't read The Republic and you don't understand how democracies degenerate or how they rise from oligarchies, you won't understand why the world is degenerating the way it is. There's very little new that is happening in politics that didn't happen in classical Greece.
That's a great point.
Everything that has happened in human society has been a rehash of previous examples of more or less the same theme. In my book, in the first chapter, I have a section on the French Revolution. And this I found to be utterly fascinating.
Yes. Robespierre. Yep.
Yeah, I don't know how many people have studied the French Revolution or know much about it.
Not
They
enough, but that's a great reason to buy your book, because you distill it down to the key points that really, if people understood how bad and communistic the French Revolution really was, they wouldn't look upon it favorably, in my opinion.
No, I would say more fascistic than communistic.
Oh, okay, fascistic. All right.
Because, I mean, communism, well, hang on, let me slow down a second here. Possibly. Fascism and communism are both tyrannies, but of a slightly different nature.
I agree.
But what Robespierre did, and Philippe Saint-Just, the other people who were the radical revolutionaries, they sort of imposed their will on the public, and they said, we are going to interpret reality for everybody, and we can't have differences of opinion because that will destroy the perfect nature of our government, of the right of the poorest of the poor to govern, and we will govern in their name. And this is very similar to how say actually the Bolsheviks came to power. They arrogated to themselves the right to govern Russia in the name of all working people. But and also Hitler took over Germany because he thought the Nazi Party was the one to lead the whole nation. And so you have the situation where the self-interest of the government becomes defined as the general will of the public at large. But I just want to bring out that people who buy Shoot the Messengers should pay very close attention to the quotations I pick from Robespierre. These are actual words I translate from the French myself. So you look at what he said and how similar his tyranny is to what we have in the United States. Now, most people think of the French Revolution, they think of Louis XVI, Marie Antoinette, and the guillotine. That's pretty much what people think of when they think of the French Revolution. But the revolution didn't just happen out of nowhere. It had been building for quite some time. And when you look at the people who ended up taking over, we have this was actually copied later on in the Russian Revolution. There were moderates, but then the moderates got pushed out. And there were at times moderates in the Republican Party.
Right.
And apart from Massey and maybe one or two others, there aren't very many left. There are a bunch of radical no-minds.
Well, Greg, isn't it interesting how there's this toxic peer pressure bullying to by the MAGA-tard conservative types to keep all their operatives in line, and if somebody steps out of line, like Marjorie Taylor Greene did and a couple others, they are just hounded to where they had to quit. She couldn't take it anymore. I mean, that's just such lowbrow bullshit. It's because these people are actually standing up for their constituents, and so they're driven out. Then unbelievable.
It is. But see, the problem. See, what's interesting is that this has not really been brought up much in the press. Is that the conduct of the Trumpocracy is overtly and unapologetically criminal.
Yes.
The rule of law is the great impediment to their success. And they are unapologetic. They make no bones about what they're doing. They are actually attacking the United States. America is under attack, under military attack, except that the people attacking it are the very people people elect to protect them. This is a coup d'etat, not the first the United States has endured, but the most recent coup d'etat is Trump. This is why you've seen
You
that.
bring up a great point. And in fact, I was always stunned back when Bush the Junior was elected and Cheney basically became the de facto, power behind the curtain, and he refused to put his holdings in a trust. Up until then, all elected leaders, presidents, vice presidents would put everything they had in a trust to be kept, and they had no direct say. And Cheney, much the way he dropped the standards of decorum on the congressional floor when he would like go fuck yourself to these other people he didn't like, and then he refused to park his holdings in a trust, so he actively was corrupt in making presidential or vice presidential decisions that benefited Halliburton specifically and benefited his bottom line. And it's only gotten 1,000 times worse since then. So
It has. You see, Cheney. I don't call the Bush government a go. I call it a junta throughout
there you go.
throughout the host and the parasite, because this was basically an attack on the Constitution. George Bush was incompetent. He was a front man for Cheney, and Cheney is a mouthpiece for Israel. And this is, again, I believe this is either the sixth or the seventh stage in the Zionization of America, which is the theme of my book, The Host and the Parasite. There's this,
Right.
there are 7 stages of Zionization, and I identify each one in sequence. And I think Bush was the 7th one, I think. And in this case, Cheney set up Cheney helped normalize criminality.
Right.
It wasn't as obvious because there was still the illusion that America was a democratic state. People went to the polls. There was no overt attack on the right to vote. There was no overt kidnapping and killing of people on the street. There was none of the egregious neo-Nazi thuggery that Trump is imposing on America. So the illusion of a democracy is possible, or was possible. Now, because of the normalization of the World Trade Center myth and the cult of the war on terrorism, this has essentially corrupted the mentality of American society. It gave us a zeitgeist of fear, paranoia, xenophobia, and corporatism, much more so than had existed before. I mean, the Zionists had been dominating American politics for some time, but it was only with the the Cheney junta that it became there was an acceleration of the
Right.
Zionism. And this is the great crime this is why I start my great crime at World Trade Center, because the World Trade Center, and then the SARS-2 virus, and then the attack on Ukraine, or the provocation of Russia that led to the attack on Ukraine. These are the ones that are defining reality for the United States and for the world in general. And it's important to know that this is how the media allowed it to happen. And Cheney played up the media. Cheney controlled what went out. He was the one, if I remember correctly, that ordered the shoot down of the plane in Pennsylvania.
Yes, that's right.
Because it was supposed
Yeah,
to.
a lot of debris from a plane. Somehow it once again broke the laws of physics and all managed to go down this little hole.
But again, people knew what was going on, but they weren't allowed to say anything. And that is the great crime of America. It's the inhibition of expression. Even if you know it's a lie, if it is not admitted, and it's not a lie. Officially, the official narrative continues, it perpetuates itself. But this is this is the main reason also why I wrote Shoot the Messengers. I wanted the media, the public, to realize the degree to which they had been lied to. And hopefully people become angry enough to do what the people in Albania are doing to Jared Kushner,
Right.
to
Now
Trump.
that is inspirational. Well,
That's
Greg,
going
we've
to be
reached the
my new
top.
book, actually.
Oh, fantastic. We've reached the top of the hour. I want to again mention of people that I called it Felton's Bundle, but Dave is clever. Felton's Flock, all 4 of Greg's books. You can get it and save 10%, $82. And again, the point is not that suddenly you're going to be an acolyte to Greg Felton. The point is you don't have to, choose his political perspective or his worldview. But the point is you want to own this because of the decades of research and, the non-traditional but unbelievably damning effective research of these various individuals and quotes that that Greg puts in these books. And again, you can save 10%. And that's why you want to own it. And not because, I suddenly agree with everything Greg says. You want this as a reference to read them and then highlight or take notes or what have you. But then you have access to all these damning quotes of why, especially in the latest book, Shoot the Messengers, the so-called Fourth Estate is nothing more than traitorous gaslighting weasels who serve their $1 million paychecks and spewing lies that sadly a dumbed down public in the first world laps up like newborn kittens in warm milk. It's just insane, but you owe it to yourself to go get Felton's Flock and have these as a reference. I mean, Johnny Baston's in the chat. He said Greg's brilliant work on The Host and the Parasite woke him up or awakened him. I hate to these commies choose these words and like woke instead of just the real meaning. Awakened him to the fact that holy shit, this parasitic cancer, this metastasization is bad. And so if you can wake up a retired Navy grunt, Greg, you can wake up a lot of people. And so please go use GMAN, save 10% and get Felton's Flock. You owe it to yourself to have these 4 books as reference books. All right. So Greg, let's begin. Let's say hello to everybody in the chat real quick. So far we've got Blaston Baston is loving it. And he says, that's why I haven't voted since 2012 because of Ron Paul got hosed. Yeah, that was really disgusting. All right. The Shoe Collector's here. Good to see you. Bearhead's here. Greetings from Kelowna, Kelowna.
Kelowna, that's here in my province. There we go.
Oh, okay. So you got a fellow Canadian supporter, Greg. That's awesome.
Yeah. Just takes 5 hours. That's all it takes to drive there.
That's not bad. Clown Prince of Racism is here. Someday you'll be the king of racism. All right. So it's great. All right. Again, you guys really need to go get the Felton Flock. The research is stellar, and the unexpected quotes, especially how Greg weaves the narrative of Robespierre. I thought that was especially well done in your book, Shoot the Messengers, Greg, because everybody knows the kind of like the cliched take of the French Revolution, but the way you break it down and the insidious nature of what was really achieved, I hadn't seen anyone else do that quite as well and as succinctly as you did.
Well, thank you very much, Giuseppe. What I wanted to do with that I wanted to debunk the illusion that politics exists on a continuum of progress. It doesn't. I mean, we've had democracies, monarchies, autocracies, and various forms of government throughout history.
Sure.
But when you come to a democracy, people sort of think that we stop evolving, that this is the pinnacle of human societal achievement. And one thing about Robespierre that I want to draw attention to is that he managed to establish his tyranny by drawing a line under French history. he consigned the aristocracy and the monarchy to a bygone period of terror, of inequality and exploitation. Now, the new democracy
Mm-hmm.
of the revolutionary government is going to start over. We're going to be much better. We are going to be the equality government that we never had. And so, without paying any attention to the past, even the good things that the monarchy or the aristocracy did, they were cut off. And what ended up happening is that the democracy that Robespierre and others created ended up mutating almost instantly into tyranny, because there is no such thing as one perfect form of government. And this is what Aristotle understood. His ideal government was a mixture of popular government, which he called polity or constitutional government, and aristocracy, governed and administered by the middle class, because the middle class had no axe to grind. I mean, the poor want to take from the wealthy in the form of redistribution, and the wealthy want to keep their privileges. They don't want to share.
Of
So
course.
the middle class is supposed to be the great equalizer, and it's no coincidence that the middle class in North America is being destroyed,
Yes.
because all revolutions in America and the middle and other countries have been conducted by the middle class.
Right.
The poor don't have the organizational wherewithal, and then the wealthy don't want it at all. So the middle class is the only part of society that has the intellectual and organizational wherewithal to launch a revolution. So if you break America, for example, into the very poor and the very rich, you're going to have a thoroughly corrupt, tyrannical society that eventually will collapse. It has to. I mean, at some point, there's going to be revolution. And unfortunately, I don't see any alternative for the United States other than armed rebellion against the government, because the government does not represent the United States, the Americans. It represents Zionist occupiers. But Americans aren't used to looking at their government as an occupation government.
Right.
They still internalize the illusion of democracy. They still internalize the notion that votes matter. They think that the world of appearance and the world of reality are interchangeable. But you see, this is why I object to the use of the term president for Trump. He is not a president. He has never been a president. He is an occupational sock puppet for corporations and Israelis. He's a stooge.
That's a great point. Greg, I have a question for you.
Sure.
So when I was a little boy growing up in the 1960s in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, there was, the offshoot of the United States being deceived into World War II was massive manufacturing capacity. Was, everything was put into the war effort, and it was just humming, right? So afterwards, you have all these people who went and killed, they're Germans killing Germans and yada yada. So they had to reward these people for a while for their sacrifice, basically. So they allowed this manufacturing base then to migrate into away from military into, making everything. The United States was manufacturing powerhouse. And where I'm going with this is I literally had uncles and cousins who didn't even have to graduate high school. When I was a little boy, they'd go work at A.O. Smith or Harnischfeger or any of the giant manufacturers. They made a living wage. They had a powerful union. They were able to own a home in the city, own 2 cars. The wife didn't have to work. She could be there taking care of the house and the kids. And if they were good with their money, they could have a little cottage on a lake somewhere. Back then, it was super cheap to buy something like that. So there was a commitment via the illusion of political decision making to champion the workers. And so that was the first, they gutted that, and then they went after the lower third rung of the middle class. They've gutted that. Now they're destroying the entire middle class. So what are your thoughts on the fact that these people who aren't dumb are just going along with it? So you go in my lifetime from when I was, let's say 6 years old in 1965 to where I'm 66 years old now. You've got people who used to be able to go and
Yeah.
Unless you were a total reprobate, you'd get hired by A.O. Smith because they were desperate for workers, to now you're trying to drive for Uber or Lyft or something, or you're making coffee at Starbucks again, but crappy money, not a living wage.
Mm-hmm.
You're nihilistic. You have no hope for the future, and this is just in our lifetimes. This is happening.
But this, to understand how the United States could go from a country where a person could have a decent life on one income, could live a relatively happy existence.
Right.
You have to go back to October 23rd, 1971. Now, that date should live in infamy, as FDR might say. That's when a man named Lewis Powell wrote a memorandum to
Memorandum. Yep, I know all about it.
Eugene Sidnor, the Education Committee, U.S. Chamber of Commerce. It was essentially an alarm to corporate America to get its act together, because Powell realized that eventually corporations would end up losing influence to the public, to the working class. And the Powell Memorandum ended up redefining economic reality. It began the cult of public relations as a major driver of corporate promotion. It destroyed the equality that had been the dominant ethos during the 1960s. It meant that corporations had no obligation to anything except their shareholders. They were there to make money. They weren't there to support their workers. They were simply there to be greedy bastards and take out of society as much as it wanted. And that is when America started to die.
Yes.
And it was at the height, it was just 2 years before the Roe versus Wade decision, and the rise of the Heritage Foundation is the first conservative or neo-fascist think tank that rose in response to the rise of the rights movement of the 1960s. The Great Society started to die with the Powell Memorandum and the rise of the Heritage Foundation. So
isn't it interesting that they rewarded Powell for his dastardly deeds by putting him on the Supreme Court?
Yeah, that was Nixon's great gift to America.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah.
But most people have no idea. This is what makes America such an insidious country, is that the stripping of rights from Americans happened so slowly over time that no one really noticed. This is like the frog, like Alison Weir says. She is the whole metaphor that if you want to kill a frog, you put it in cold water, then slowly rise the temperature.
Boil it, right? Yeah.
It'll boil it to death, and it won't even realize it's dying.
But if you drop it in boiling water, it's going to hop out and save its life. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So this is what happened to America. Now it's too late. America is beyond saving. America is dead. It is a corpse. It is a defective, toxic, bacteria-ridden corpse of what used to be a republic, to the extent it ever was a republic, really. And now America.
That is a great point. And so, this will be probably for future books in the next decade. But what do you think's coming? Do you think that it is done? I mean, how do these young generations, like you've got these young people in Patriot Front, they're like that young fella Thomas Rousseau just gave a real inspirational speech on the 4th of July, the 250th anniversary of the country. But, again, getting back to their brilliant book, Shoot the Messenger, there was no coverage in the mainstream media. So unless you know to go look for this guy and watch him on independent media, you have no idea that these young people are desperately trying to create some type of way to save their future. And it's heartbreaking, Greg. It's just heartbreaking that there's no obvious way to win this day unless there is some form of revolution. But, I don't see a lot of revolutionary types in my daily life. So.
No, what's happened again, this is why it's kind of interesting to look at American society in a rather large aggregate perspective, which is what I'll be doing in my next book.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's one thing to look at the most obvious great crimes of the World Trade Center, the SARS-2 virus, the provocation of Russia,
Right.
the false history of the genocide of the Holocaust, for example.
Right.
Those are the ones that have formed the nucleus of the degeneration of American democracy.
Yes.
But it's not just them. They're the ones that are the most conspicuous. I mean, Trump, through his own idiocy, it's like trying to steal Greenland from Denmark.
That was a good one.
That's hilarious.
This guy's so out of control. He invades. You cover it in one of your final chapters with Venezuela. Just out of the blue. No, diplomatic effort. Just I'm going to start blowing up these little cigarette speedboats because they're all bringing drugs. But as you cover in your book, I don't want to give away too much. People should own this book, but that's nonsense. There's no. That's not an efficient way to deliver drugs in the United States.
I mean, it was asinine. But here's the point: the official narrative was so corrupt and so stupid that the media didn't do anything about it. It sort of allowed it to exist. It perpetuated it. It didn't call into question the veracity because the reporters aren't there to investigate and report. They're there to parrot.
Yes.
And there was this great scene. There's a scene in my book where these New York Times reporters are sitting with Trump in his office and they're interviewing him. And they're acting like little mindless robots. They don't think. They're just taking down and being like glorified stenographers, not reporters. I mean, there is nothing left of the reporting industry. Well, I shouldn't say nothing, but very little left. I mean, there are, ironically, two reporters who are doing great work, pointing out, doing an analysis of the Trump regime. And I have to say, I'm sorry, I've forgotten their names.
Are they on what platform are they on? Maybe we can figure it out that way.
I don't know. I think they're New York Times reporters.
Oh, well, you know what? Maybe what'll happen is if we address another New York Times question, the idea that this traitorous, gaslighting 21st century Tokyo Rose propagandist Bari Weiss, this Israeli, is now been propped up to run the New York Times. It's just insane.
Well, so this is I think it's Will Lamb and Justin Swanson. I'm not sure if that's them.
Okay.
But there are people writing about the actually taking direct aim at Trump, which is kind of ironic because the New York Times is one of the most corrupt news organizations in America. And as I showed in my book in chapter 5 about the false history of the Holocaust, this is how the media sold the lie of 6 million dead Jews. Because the only way to sell this was to simply assert it over and over again and to blackmail the world into approving something based upon a false moral foundation.
Sure.
So the journalism that we have today really doesn't exist in any recognizable form, except in some very rare instances. And those who do have the courage to report are targeted. I mean, New York Times reporters and Washington Post reporters had their homes invaded by allegedly law enforcement agencies, because they had the temerity to say things that Trump didn't like.
That I mean, what an incredible bully Trump and his administration are, and but it seems as though even more and more of the MAGA types, his real base, are questioning what the hell's going on. So I don't know. Well, it's probably too little, too late, though.
It is, and what's really distressing is that none of this should ever have happened. I mean, you look
Right.
at the
Agreed.
people Trump appointed to his cabinet; they're all grossly incompetent.
Yes.
Um, Pete Hegseth is an embarrassment to humanity. He's a sociopathic Christian nut job that had no experience in the military worth speaking of. He had no qualifications to be Secretary of Defense, and yet the Republicans on the approval committee approved his nomination. We can blame the Senate for Trump's existence. They could have stopped this
Yeah.
many
Yeah.
times over,
Right.
but they didn't. The Supreme Court could have stopped Trump. It didn't. Trump is a crime that was allowed to happen. He
Yes.
didn't have to take an army and take over the White House. He simply exploited the weaknesses in the existing political system.
Well, what did they call it? The controlled takeover. The way he insulted Jeb Bush, who had everybody thought he'd just be the next Bush. It seemed to me it was all bad kabuki theater that they wanted him in there for sure.
Well, you have to look at what happened to the Republican Party before his first election. Um, the Democrats had, I think, a lock on the White House because whether you like their policies or not, and I think they went far too far with the moralizing of imposing a sort of a morality, like a anti-hate morality.
Right. Right.
Or they really went too far, and they
Way
ended up
too
becoming
far.
undemocratic.
Yes.
However, in contrast to that, which again you can attack, the Republicans had nothing to offer. They were intellectually and morally bankrupt. And so a lot of people who were planning to vote in on the subsequent election looked at the Republican nominees, candidates for the presidency, and they rejected all of them.
Right.
So there was nobody no governor, senator, congressman, state senator, state congressman, or other type of professional that was deemed worthy. And so people ended up voting for Trump by default. I mean, here
And
was
again, that was intentional. That wasn't this organic event. That they led by those nose rings all the MAGA-tards that way. Don't you think?
I to be quite honest, I that's possible. But if you are looking at Trump in 2020 and 2024, I mean, 2016
16,
was
right? The first
16,
time,
yeah,
yeah.
2016. There was nobody else to run for him, to run for office.
Right. Yep.
So he promised no more forever wars. He promised all bunch of great things,
I
and
didn't deliver on any of it.
he looked like he was a defensible candidate.
Yeah.
But of course, he gets elected and he becomes a certifiable idiot.
Yes.
But again, the Supreme Court allowed it, and Trump was allowed to stack the Supreme Court with a bunch of idiots.
Yeah.
The Gorsuch should not be there. Kavanaugh should not be there. And certainly Thomas should not be there, but he was appointed by Reagan.
Right. And the newest, that woman who can't define what a biological woman is, the latest one, she's an embarrassment. Well, everyone on the modern Supreme Court, to a greater or lesser degree, is rather an embarrassment, in my opinion. They're just all political hacks.
Well, this is also what worries me, is that Merrick Gardner did not get nominated for Supreme Court because the Trumpublicans sabotaged his nomination.
Right.
Remember, this is when Obama was leaving office. He wanted Merrick Gardner. I think his name was Merrick Gardner.
Merrick Garland.
Garland, that was right. Yes, Merrick Garland. And so don't forget, the woman who just got appointed was done at the last minute, and the Trumpublicans had the majority, so they pushed it through.
Right.
And she had no business being appointed.
No, not at all. Yeah.
So what I love,
okay,
the Supreme Court has to be gutted. I don't know how to. I think what has to happen, and this is kind of a weird thing to say, there has to be a full scale overthrow of the government, and that would be an illegal act. But
Right.
so what? The United States has to start over.
Yes.
Now, whether that means having all 50 states form one union or having a bunch of smaller states form different mini states, we have to get over the idea that the 1776 revolution and the 1787 Constitution have any value. They are
Right.
consigned to history. They are junk. There has to be some new political order, because an order that is free of Zionist influence. And I have a series of recommendations at the end of my book about what has to happen if the United States is to recover itself to the extent it can be recovered.
Well, yeah, and those are excellent recommendations, and we want people to buy the book because it's real salient. So we're not going to read you the list. We want you
Oh,
to
no.
buy the book. I'm just looking for oh yeah, here it is. It's on page
275.
275. I'm just
Yeah.
going to do the first bullet point because they're all really good. And the first one is acknowledge the Holocaust trademark to be fraud and an instrument of moral blackmail based on Jewish superstition and atrocity propaganda. That one we hammer constantly anyway, so we'll give that one away for free, Greg. But the other ones,
Okay.
you got to buy the book, and they're so good. And again, another thing that just I think I got to compliment you again, that the way you distilled Robespierre's actions, I've never seen it so well done or so succinctly done. And everybody knows what the French Revolution was, but I guarantee you 99 out of 100 Americans don't understand it in its real context the way you lay out.
Well, thanks. It was fun to do. It was fun to
So
use some French sources too for that.
yeah, exactly. So what do you think's coming for I mean, Canada's got its own Alberta's trying to break off. Do you think this is
Yeah,
all
it'll never happen. Alberta is a cranky little petulant baby state that thinks it has thinks that it thinks that its own self-interest should take precedence over everybody else's. I live in British Columbia on the coast, and we do not want oil tankers coming up the Inside Passage. We do not want tankers on the coast.
There you go.
It's dangerous for the environment. It's also not necessary.
Right.
Meanwhile,
Exactly.
the whiny little children in Alberta think, oh, well, this is anti-Alberta. We have a right to do the yeah. Shut up. They don't. I mean, Alberta is selfish, okay, and it has the arrogant position that we provide the oil. We provide so much revenue for Canada that we should get what we want. And no, whenever Alberta gets told no, it throws a tantrum. It's a bit like Trump.
Yeah.
So I call Alberta the Texas of Canada. So it has the same sort of mentality.
Yeah.
And
That's
so
a good one.
it will never take place because there's no mechanism for secession. If there were such a mechanism, Quebec would have separated ages ago.
Oh, great point. Well, so you know what isn't being talked about anymore is the North American Union, right? So what do we look at the three main countries of North America? Mexico, they installed that Claudia Sheinbaum. The cartels killed literally 23 other candidates. So in a Catholic country, this globalist Zionist is suddenly president. And you've got that Carney, who is a globalist traitor to the citizens of Canada, and then you've got the United States, which is literally de-evolving more and more into a shit show. So do you think at some point they're going to take the destabilization of those three countries and try and wind it up into something new? And then if that's the case, do we as the people of these three countries that are being forced into something new, do we can we exert any effort politically to have it be something that's beneficial to the citizens of the North American Union? Or is that never going to happen because they're just going for the one world government? That's kind of a complex question, but your thoughts?
Well, the thing is with Carney, we have to look at him a little bit more favorably to begin with. Um, he came to the prime ministership by without a benefit of an election. Justin Trudeau, who had been leader since 2015, was a
Right.
consummate failure.
Yes.
He was an embarrassment. He was incompetent.
Yeah.
He did a lot of damage to Canada, particularly through his coercive imposition of the SARS injections, and so he was really loathed by a lot of people, and justifiably so. So Carney comes along and really, I think, did an outstanding job standing up to Trump. Because I cannot imagine Justin Trudeau, who is like a boy in a man's job, trying to standing up to Trump to defend Canada. Trudeau was so interested in being liked. He had such an insatiable ego that
Right.
I just don't see him doing anything useful for Canada. Now, as far as globalism goes, yes, that is a real problem, and I do touch on that in my book. When I look at the SARS-2 virus, I go right after Klaus Schwab, and I basically slice and dice him like a tuna.
He deserved it.
He's corrupt. He's just
Yes.
horrible. And but
Yep.
that's in, I think, this is about the SARS. This is chapter 3. I go after him, and so the globalization has to be done. It has to be ended by force. It cannot be done procedurally. The reason that can't happen is that there is no mechanism, because the mechanism is corrupt. And so we end
Yes.
up with a scenario where we are forced to deal with the corrupt world order, but we can't reform that world order because the mechanism to reform it doesn't exist.
Yeah.
So now I really don't know what to say about what the public can do outside of full-scale armed rebellion. Now that's a dangerous thing to recommend,
Yeah.
but I don't see any alternative. Now this is why the Albanian example is such an interesting one, because the Albanians have done what they had to do.
Yes, they set the prime minister's residence on fire. They said, we're not giving this beautiful paradise of our people away to these globalist Zionists. And yeah, they basically said no, and made it known that they were not going to back down. And finally, the government had to back down.
So this is the why, if this can happen in Albania, why doesn't it happen in the United States?
That is a great question.
And this is what I'm beginning my new book with. Why Albania, which is not really thought of as a gleaming symbol of democracy,
No, not at all.
is a better representation of public engagement I hate that word, of public involvement in their own lives and public
Right.
involvement in the political system than the West. And the one thing that you're going to notice here is that Albania is very small.
Right.
It has a homogeneous population.
Yep.
It has a collective consciousness of what it means to be Albanian. Now that's the key point. There's a collective national consciousness that does not exist in Canada or the United States. And that's how, as I say in the title, Divided and Conquered, the public can be played off one against the other. And how a tyranny can perpetuate itself because there is little ability of the public to organize a unified coherent opposition. Whether that's military or not depends on the situation. But right now there is no mechanism by which the public can reclaim its democratic liberties short of rebellion, because the system is so corrupt it cannot be reformed.
That is a great point. So, are you encouraged in any way in the United States by finally the average normie is waking up and saying these data centers are horrible? They don't bring any benefit to the community. They poison the groundwater. If there's actually two kinds of AI building, there's the ones that make noise 24/7. That's not AI, that's Bitcoin mining. And then the ones that actually do deliver the AI with these advanced NVIDIA graphics, they're quiet, but they still use inordinate amounts of pure water to cool these systems, and the poisoned water then gets dumped back outside. So,
Well,
a lot of people are waking up and saying, and mildly revolting over that. Do you think, in your mind, is there any possibility that empowerment can lead to greater things like an actual revolution where the people put a sane type of parliamentary government in place in the United States, so the will of the various factions of the people can be debated and voted on in some kind of adult manner, as opposed to having this insane, immature, a kook Trump, this narcissistic Neo Caligula running things?
Well, I think the data centers might be the issue that pushes that makes push come to shove. Because if you have people told they can't run their air conditioners or the refrigerators because, well, the data center needs the power, you're going to see massive sabotage of
Right.
data centers. You're going to see armed rebellion.
Yep.
You're going to see people elected that are going to be anti-establishment. And I'm going to make a prediction based upon my knowledge of American history. Now, as you know, back when the Americas started, you had the Federalist Party, which was Washington, Adams, and so forth. And you had the other one, which was the Democratic Republicans, which sounds a
Right.
bit like a contradiction today, but
Right.
at any rate,
Yeah.
which is Thomas Jefferson, Aaron Burr, and James Monroe.
Right.
Now, eventually, the Federalists ended up burning their own bridges because they started this horrible. They had the Harvard Declaration, which they said, well, the Democratic Republicans were treasonous, blah blah blah. So they basically shot themselves in the foot. So they ended up killing the party. And so in 1820, we had an election with James Monroe, which was all one party. It was a one-party state in the United States for about 4 years. It was called the Era of Good Feelings, which is a horrible expression. It sounds rather, well, weird, but it's when it meant that there was no political division anymore. It was all united. Well, eventually, out of the Democratic Republicans, you had certain pro-federalist sentiment that remained, and they formed the Whig Party. Now, the Whigs were a very strong party, and James Knox Polk was a Whig, and it was under him that America's manifest destiny spread westward like a virus. But the Whigs burned themselves out also. They lost, credibility, and so out of that arose the Republican Party. And the Republican Party believed in free land, free soil, Fremont, James Fremont was the leader of the party.
There you go.
The first president, I'm sorry, of the Republicans was Abraham Lincoln.
Right.
So he was the first Republican. And the Republicans, after him, degenerated into a corrupt crony first policy.
Sure.
But the Democrats were consigned to the wilderness because they were simply the slave party. So from 1860 to 1912, you had a consistent Republican government, with the exception of two discontinuous presidencies of the Democratic Grover Cleveland. So it was virtually a Republican state. And so that's what America was. It was a ossified, sclerotic political entity.
Right.
Now, since we had the Whigs rose and fell, the Federalist Party rose and fell, I'm going to predict the Democratic Party is going to collapse. The Democratic Party today, for the most part, are a bunch of corporate do-nothings that basically kiss the ring of Israel and essentially give the illusion that they care about Americans when all they really care about is getting corporate money from Israeli sources. They're a disgusting party. And you had the likes of Hillary Clinton, who was toxic, Kamala Harris, who was quite literally stupid.
What an embarrassment. Yeah.
She was ridiculous. And so
Yeah.
Trump got elected largely because the Democrats didn't have the courage to put up an intelligent, pro-American candidate. They
Yes.
put up a bunch of Zionist sock puppets that were going to perpetuate the very stupidity that made Israel possible in the first place. So I look at that and I look at people like Zoran Mamdani. Now, he's starting the concept of democratic socialism.
Right.
And I'm going to predict, hopefully I'm right on this, that the Democratic Party is going to split. There's going to be a Democratic Socialist Party and a Democratic Party.
Huh.
And if you look at what happened in the early 20th century, there was a man named Eugene Debs, who was
Sure. Famous
America's
name. Yeah.
first socialist candidate for president. And he
That's
was
right.
not a bad man. He was a very good man.
Yeah, he was. Right.
But Americans have no understanding of what socialism is.
No.
They have no concept of the public good. They
Right.
think the government has no place in interfering or bettering the lives of Americans. The only function the government has is to defend the country, stay out of the marketplace, and let the whole thing just play itself out. Well, that's how the stock market crashed in 1929.
Right.
Calvin Coolidge was a horrible president. He took his
Yes.
hands off and he just let a bunch of greedy greedy
Carpetbaggers. Yeah.
capitalists run the show. But again, when Ronald Reagan took over, I mean, he essentially revisited the same sort of imbecility that Calvin Coolidge did. It's utterly disgraceful. So now
I
we have
totally
a
agree.
scenario where the people who are Democrat voters are going to vote for candidates like Mamdani. And this is happening all over the country, where you have state elections or you have mayoral elections or senatorial elections. It's the Democratic Socialists that are winning. And these are good people. I mean, Americans have to get over their prejudices and their vacuous, absolutist mythologies that socialism is uniquely associated with Russia or China or some other such country. That's not true.
No.
I mean,
Well, here's a cautionary tale, or that back in Milwaukee at the turn of the 19th century, it was total robber barons, and with the Milwaukee River and the other rivers all meet down there by the lake, total toxic pollution of leather tanning and all these other, and there was child labor, and so there was a riot, a revolt, and the rich Milwaukeean types like Juneau and Van Buren and the others hired Pinkertons, and they suppressed the riot over bad wages, these kids dying, and they ended up, I think, killing 17 or 19 people and wounding like 168. It was a slaughter. But Milwaukee was a primary German town, and there were German socialists. And you're right about not knowing history, because German socialism is actually a very effective way to govern a homogenous population. And so there was a fellow named Frank Zeidler and some others who were German socialists, and they started to run for mayor. It took him 12 or 16 years. He was finally elected. Then he got a German socialist common council, and horror of horrors, instead of Milwaukee turning into a communist shithole, which is what these idiotic, ignorant Americans think socialism is. It was they turned the city into a beautiful, wonderful place to live. They created all these boulevards with greenery, and every boulevard led you to a city park. And Milwaukee had one of the nationally awarded great park systems. They created, employment reforms that you couldn't work if you were under like 14 or something. It just, instead of being the nightmare that all these capitalists feared, it was a golden age for Milwaukee. And so that's the key to German socialism. And it's so sad that the modern Americans in the 60s, they used to teach, civics, and people knew their history, and that's all been eliminated since Reagan. So
you're quite
Greg.
right. You're perfectly correct. And what's even worse is that there were some good examples of government in the United States that were deliberately turned down.
Right.
They were undermined. They were destroyed because Americans are essentially stupid and selfish. That's a bit of a categorical claim, and I don't mean that applies to all of them, but American society, by and large, is greedy, selfish, and Christian. And this is a very toxic stew, because how do you train people to think for themselves if their whole world of economics and politics is cast over with a religious absolutism? People want to make as much money as they can. They don't want to pay taxes. I mean, nobody does really. But there's no concept of an American consciousness. There is only individual Americans who think that they're out for themselves and it doesn't matter what happens to other people. Selfishness is the great criminal element in America that turns it from being a country of it stops it from being a society into being an agglomeration of atomistic, self-serving economic interests. It's the atomization of America that is destroying it, because because people who think that Americans can band together to do something good, these people will be attacked because it will take profits away from corporations. I mean, did you know that there was some baby food that had asbestos in it?
Right.
And rather than recall the baby food for 90 cents per unit to fix that, the company allowed the babies to die because it was cheaper to pay out.
Yep. I mean, there's so many instances of that. Unbelievable.
Yeah. This is car manufacturers. I mean, Ford did that as well. I mean, the Pinto was like a little bomb. You hit a Pinto at the back.
Hit it from behind, it would blow up.
Yeah. So American business, see, it's the corporate takeover of America, which gives us not capitalism, but crony capitalism. And it's the crony capitalism that has been elevated to the level of national ethos by Donald Trump. He openly gives money to those people who give him campaign donations. You want to see my tweet about 10 seconds before it goes live? Here, give me $100,000 a month. That is so grossly corrupt that you don't have to prove it's corrupt. It's by definition corrupt.
Oh, and what he's doing to set up all his kids with the crypto and all, it's so wanton, blatant corruption everywhere. There's no instance where he's not just using the power of the presidency to feather his own nest. He's a piece of shit.
And that's expressly prohibited. The presidency, you cannot use the office of the presidency to enrich yourself. That is written.
Right.
So again, the question I have to come back to is, how is it allowed to happen?
Right.
Why isn't it being stopped? And when I state in my book that Trump is not the problem, he's just the top of a very corrupt pyramid that goes to the Reagan administration at least. And if that pyramid collapses, the pyramid has to collapse. If you cut off Trump off the top of the pyramid, you get just the top chopped off. You put somebody else up there, and the pyramid stays up. But you have to destroy the pyramid. But how many Americans have the courage or the wherewithal to do anything about it? And this is why I'm concerned that America is such a dead country that it cannot survive any longer. Americans have to admit that they live in an occupied Zionist satrapy. They don't live in an independent state. So once Americans accept the fact that they are an occupied people, that they are the Palestinians of North America, only then will they do something radical. Now, we can take heart in these No Kings protests, in these pro-Palestinian protests, but these are essentially issue-specific protests, and they come and they go. They come and they go.
Right.
We need a fundamental, long-term societal movement to overthrow the government, purge Congress and the Supreme Court of the sycophants, and restock them, and either restock them with good people or start over. Because why does the United States even exist? Even after the Civil War, Lincoln wanted to bring back the Confederate States back into the Union. And the question could be asked is, why did he bother? Why not just consign them to the wilderness and just reform the United States with the northern states, the Union? Let the southern states take care of themselves.
Well, that's a great point. And under the pre-Constitution Articles of Confederation,
Yeah.
all states, especially the southern states, had the right to leave the federal government if they wanted to. So that was originally one of the deals to come and make a federal government, is the states had the right to leave if they wanted to. So yeah.
The thing is,
Hey, Greg, let me jump in and promo
Sure.
the Felton flock one more time, and then I'm going to give you the
Sure.
2 hours of race by. All the good discussions do, but let's see if we can get some people to buy your 4-pack, and then I want to give you a final closing statement as long as you want.
Sure.
All right, so go to Banned by Amazon if you want to use your credit or debit card and order Felton's flock. As I said in hour 1, his new book is just brilliant, and it's holding the corrupt media responsible. The Fourth Estate, we're all told, oh, the free press, the press is independent. No, it's not. It hasn't been probably forever, maybe a little bit in the 50s and 60s locally or regionally, but certainly not to where everybody holds it to this gold standard. So Greg has literally, written 4 great books covering the globalist takeover of many of the first world nations, especially the United States and Canada. The Brilliant Host and the Parasite looks at how the Bush 1 administration was the launching pad for a literal Zionist takeover of the United States, to where anything Israel and its corrupt, psychopathic prime minister wants, it gets. And then Greg did a great job researching the SARS-CoV and the actual truth of where it came from. Of course, it was developed and patented years before release. And so, again, Greg was smart enough to track the patents. And then the new book is just, Exploring Middle East Myths is great. It's just a series of essays. But the Shooting the Messenger is a must-own book, because the research, like I said in hour 1, for every well-known Jamie McIntyre, there's no instance or example of a plane actually crashing here. And so he had to eat crow, eat jag to keep his career, which is sad. But the beauty of Shoot the Messengers is Greg then spends years of research, and he has 5 quotes you never heard of from experts who set the whole straw bale house of lies on fire. That's why you go to Banned by Amazon, or if you want to use crypto, go to Moonrock Books and order the Felton Flock. Use the code GMAN. You save 10%, which is pretty much shipping. So you want to have these books for reference, just kind of like Andy Carrington Hitchcock's book about the Rothschilds. It's such a great, the years of research are at your fingertips in these books. That's why you want to own them, because there's probably either we're going down bad or there's going to be a revolution. Either way, you need to be able to get up on your soapbox and convince normies who are starting to wake up that this is the right path. We have to save our country and a future for innocent children and decent people. And again, there's decent people of all races. You obey the laws, you work hard, you should be given the opportunity. And that's all being stolen from all of us now by these globalists, demon worshiping. I don't know what they are. They don't act like humans, so I don't consider them human. Anyway, go to Banned by Amazon, order the Felton Flock, use the code GMAN, GMAN, save 10%. Buy some other books while you're there. And, or if you want to use crypto, go to Money Tree Publishing. All right. So this guy puts years of his life, and he's clearly passionate in his beliefs. He's a world-class researcher. You owe it to yourself to own these books. So go buy the Felton Flock. Use the code GMAN, GMAN. Greg, it's been an honor again to have these discussions. We'll do it again soon now that I'm back to doing the long-form discussions, and I really look forward to your next book. But I want to give you as long as you want to take your final thoughts.
Okay, thanks. By the way, it turned out to be a small correction. It was the Bush II government that started the.
Oh, okay, good one. Thank you.
I don't even call him Bush. I call him W. I think I don't.
W. There you go.
Yeah.
For reason.
Anyway, just to remind people that we've covered very much everything that I wanted to say about the book. But the one thing I hope people do is that they realize the magnitude to which they have been lied to. And if they've ever had doubts about the veracity of the SARS-2 virus or of these so-called vaccines, or whether Russia really started the war against Ukraine, I hope that they find the answers they're looking for. Because one of the great lies of the false narrative is that they start with an arbitrary starting point and they go forward, but they don't pay attention to the events that led up to it. I mean, yes, Russia aggressed Ukraine in 2022 in February, but that wasn't the start of it. If you look behind that, the start goes back to 1991, and it's all NATO's fault. So one thing I do hope people find out is the history of behind the cause of the so-called cause of these great crimes. There's a lot that goes beyond it, and so people are being arbitrarily forced to accept a start date for these events, and it always looks like somebody is attacking the United States or Europe or something.
Right.
But it's not the real beginning. It's like walking into a middle of a movie and thinking you know who the murderer is, and you don't see the first two scenes. But so people will get a more comprehensive view of the great crimes that are turning their world into a real life version of 1984.
Yeah. To me, we're living like this hybrid of half 1984, half Brave New World by Huxley. It's so insidious.
That's a very good point. Yes,
they've spent so much time, literally over a century, with the Frankfurt School and other, the Tavistock Institute, really studying how to control the actions of a normal person who doesn't take accountability for their own intellect, for their own decisions, for their own research, and they're very good at it, sadly.
Yeah.
Well,
anyway,
Greg, thank you so much. It's been a great show. Hopefully we sell some books. We're going to continue to push these after, and I ran the show out to YouTube and out to Instagram and out to some of the bigger platforms.
Wow, that's great.
Yeah. So hopefully we'll get some new fans of Greg Felton's work. So thank
So-
you, Greg.
So
We'll
you can
have you
put
back soon to
you can put in
continue
a
this
show, a
discussion.
2-hour show on Amazon, on Instagram.
Yes. Mhm.
Oh, wow, I didn't know that. That's interesting.
Yeah, it's streamed. It streams live to Instagram, YouTube, FTJ, of course, X, Twitter, and what was I had it streamed live to Rumble as well.
Okay.
So there'll be plenty of options, and I'm gonna. This has been this, especially all your books are useful for. You got to own them for the research. That's you literally spent decades amassing this knowledge, and you've made it easy for people to own this book and research, because it's going to hit the fan. It's starting to hit the fan. Trump is just so out of control. It's going to hit the fan. So don't you need to be intellectually prepared and have these kind of books to convince, your pod, your group, that the direction that the country needs to take is one of sanity and supporting the hardworking, decent, law-abiding people, as opposed to the other option, which is what we don't want, the violent, insane, low impulse types. So wake up and go get Felton's Flock. All right, Greg, thank you so much. Great show as always.
Thank you, Giuseppe. See you next time, maybe in a few months.
We'll definitely do it in a few months. And let me cue up the intro song as an outro. And Greg, you have yourself a great weekend, and thank you so much for taking time. And again, everybody, please go get the Felton Flock credit card, debit card at Banned by Amazon, crypto at Money Tree Publishing. Well worth your effort. And thanks to Dave Gahari, use the code GMAN, GMAN, and you save 10%, which basically pays for your shipping, which is pretty cool. All right. So that being said, let's play the outro. And Greg, thank you so much, man. You're keep up the great work, my brother.
Do.
Take care.
Thanks, Giuseppe. Bye-bye.
Shine on, shine on, shine on, shine on, shine a light. Shine on, shine on, shine on, shine a light on truth. Shine on, shine on, shine on, shine on, shine on, shine a light. Shine on, shine on.
By the way, thank you, Tom Dwyer and APAC 40 for donations, $20 and $10. Really appreciate it. You guys, everybody have a great weekend. Go get your Felton Flock. Please do it today.
Show the whole world what you really got. The world is tied in a Gordian knot. Moral foundation complete. Dry rock, step into the light. Show us what you got. Your time is now. Truth is forget me not. Share you know how. In the G-spot. Shine on, shine on, shine on, shine on, shine a light. Shine on, shine on, shine on, shine a light on truth. Shine on, shine on, shine on, shine on, shine on, shine on. Now's your time to shine. Shine on, shine on, into the G-spot. Shine on, shine on, into the G-spot. Shine on, shine on, into the G-spot. Shine on, shine on, shine a light.